All right, Claudia, cage match time. Let's start with the big one, valuation. Why do buyers think sellers are, frankly, a bit off their rockers when it comes to price?
Because, Ramsey, every seller is convinced their business is special. That future potential, the blood, sweat, all the things we talked about back in our Q4 valuation episode, to them, it's priceless.
Yeah, but let's be real. The buyer has to look at risk, not just potential. When we see a price based on sweat equity, sure, there's pride in at work, but I can't underwrite pride, you know? If the numbers don't add up and I'm staring at a list of add backs that reads longer than War and Peace, what do you expect?
But see, that's just it. Sellers aren't crazy, they're just, well, human. I had this Georgia business owner, pet care company, who genuinely thought all those midnight vet visits, her connections with clients, they bumped her price way up. For the buyer, it looked nuts. But selling a lifetime of midnight calls for a formula, that's tough.
Right, but sweat equity and relationships don't always translate to value once the seller walks. Buyers get stuck with risk. What if the relationships aren't as sticky as the seller believes? If I overpay, my downside is real. Cash flow, key employees, all that. Sellers love to say, oh, but you'll see, it runs itself.
And sellers always say, but you're just scared. Look, I get it. Buyers want a discount for every risk. But sometimes it's just negotiation. There's emotion and there's, letting go of an identity after years. It's messy.
It is. That's why valuation tugs both ways. Buyers anchor on risk, sellers on legacy. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong, but someone's got to blink first. I'm just saying it shouldn't always be the buyer.
Oh, you dream of bargains, Ramsey. But hey, if both sides stay flexible, maybe we meet halfway, even if it's after a little drama. Speaking of drama, let's talk due diligence. This is the phase where sellers start questioning, did I really sign up for this? Buyers roll in with the microscope, right?
Yeah, but for good reason. I mean, we're about to sink 7 or 8 figures into a business. If there are cracks in the foundation, I want to know before closing, not after. Look, I once had a $12 million manufacturing deal in Atlanta nearly go down in flames over a tiny, I mean tiny, contract discrepancy in the customer list. One clause, wrong renewal date, and suddenly, big red flag for our bank.
It's exhausting for sellers though, Ramsey. They get these lists like, show me every signed order from the last decade, and, oh, explain that spike in office supplies during Q2. Sometimes the documentation just isn't there, or it's buried in a box 3 owners ago. It starts to feel more like an audit than a negotiation.
Well, yeah, but as we discussed when buying remote businesses, if things aren't documented, how do I trust what I'm seeing? Surprises kill deals. Even what looks like a minor omission can be the tip of the iceberg, especially if there's owner dependence or, obscure tech holding things together.
You want everything tied up in a bow. But not every seller's got perfect files, Ramsey, and every new diligence request feels like a test. Some deals die from sheer exhaustion. The seller's burnt out before closing. It's a balance, isn't it? How deep is too deep?
I'll admit, sometimes diligence gets over the top. But if we find out later that a locked in customer hasn't signed a contract since 2019, well, whose side should I be on? Diligence might feel invasive, but it's protection for the buyer, making sure they're not stepping into a mess. And honestly, it's what keeps deals alive in Georgia and beyond.
So, sellers, get your ducks in a row before you list. Buyers, don't wear out your future partners. Otherwise, all that goodwill you built in the valuation stage just, well, evaporates.
All right, last round, earnouts and deal structure. Claudia, you know I'm a fan. Earnouts make sense. They bridge gaps in valuation. Seller says this business will soar, buyer says prove it. Tie payout to results, problem solved, right?
Oh, you make it sound dreamy, Ramsey. But earnouts? For sellers, they're emotionally draining. You hand over control, but your future payday depends on what the buyer does next. I've seen deals where buyers change strategy, shift resources, maybe even mess up on purpose. Then, oops, targets missed, earnout vanishes. That's not risk sharing, that's a recipe for resentment.
Wait, hold on. It's not always like that. Look, sometimes earnouts are misstructured, I'll admit. But if there's real uncertainty, what else are we supposed to do? Pay the whole price up front and hope the numbers hold up? We need something to align interests, especially if a lot of value is in the future.
Yeah, but the alignment only works if both sides play fair. I've seen tech deals in Atlanta where the earnout hinges on growth. Buyer takes over, changes product direction, and the targets become unreachable. The seller gets nothing extra, even though they did all the heavy lifting pre close. It affects people, not just numbers.
That's a fair call out. Deal structure is more art than science at times. Maybe the best deals are crafted when both sides walk through the what ifs together. Scenario planning, clear metrics, mutual trust. It's not about winning the negotiation, it's about making sure the story continues after closing and that folks still talk at the next Georgia Dealmakers brunch.
That's the hope, right? Sellers get paid and move on, not spend years chasing an earnout payout that depends on someone else's decisions. Buyers get their value, but everyone's legacy gets protected. We argue about terms, but at the end of the day, it's about people's livelihoods.
Couldn't agree more, Claudia. If there's one lesson we keep repeating, it's that great deals happen when everyone leaves the table with a handshake and maybe reunites for a podcast episode to tell the story.
That's it. For listeners in the thick of M&A, remember, structure isn't just about money. It's about relationships, legacies, and sleep. Or, lack of it. Ramsey, as always, thanks for keeping it real and occasionally spicy.
Always, Claudia. And for everyone listening, hit subscribe for more behind the scenes on deals in Georgia and beyond. Until next time, keep those negotiations friendly and your due diligence even friendlier. See you, Claudia.
See you, Ramsey. Thanks, everyone. And don't let those earnouts steal your peace of mind. Catch you next time.